Kari, it's so exciting to talk to you today for She Can. Tell us a little about yourself and what you do.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm coming to you from Los Angeles. I grew up in the middle of America, rural Illinois, and I moved here in my 20s. And I had just really I work as a private chef. I worked as a private chef for about 15 years and a caterer. But as of recently, I've really been working more in the space of cooking for healing retreats for women, and also in a space of empowering women through their relationship to food. And I feel that when you have a positive relationship with food, both in your mind and also in your home, that like sort of simple habits like checking to see what's in your fridge and making your grocery list and going to the grocery store once a week. And that when you create space for that, it really supports all the other things that you're trying to do.
And yes, and I love that, Kari. It's real wisdom. Tell us a little bit about your journey of how you got to this point where you're sort of a culinary coach.
Well, really, it kind of goes to as simple as I find connection through food. So I grew up in a really small town, and when we would travel or when we would sort of get out of our town, I would see that was a way to connect with people and to sort of understand the world. And in my teenage years, I started to learn how to cook, and for me, it was such a creative outlet. It was a space for me to like really explore, flavors, but also just like processes. And but what would happen when people would sit down to eat is you see people relaxing, you see people talking to one another, you see people looking each other in the eye. And I kept sort of cooking here and there through high school and college and through my first job. And when I moved out to LA, I had a friend who said to me, oh, you're a good cook. I know this woman who is looking for someone to cook for her family. And so I went to interview with her, and that's how I became a private chef. I didn't go to culinary school. And what was really magical about that experience is that this woman was a widow, and she had two little girls. And I just became kind of the fourth member of their family, and we would eat dinner together like 3 nights a week. And she had a very rich village of people who had helped them through. Her husband had been really sick, and there were all these people that she kind of wanted to pay back and say thank you to. So she would invite them over for dinner, and sitting at that table with the girls and then with these friends of theirs, I just witnessed so much healing and connection. And it was really such an honor for me as I, sort of moved through, booking additional clients and working. I ended up sort of working with a lot of different families, and it was such a learning experience of watching how when you create a space for people to come together and talk at the end of the day and nourish their bodies, how healing that can be and how uplifting that is, for children that are in school all day long, for parents who are at work all day long, for everyone to reconnect. And, I'm not cooking as much. I don't cook in people's homes anymore. I still cater, here and there, but it really led me to this place of, beyond a recipe, what does food mean to us? Beyond just like the how to saute an onion and turn that into soup. What does that smell do in your home? What is the love that you put into your food that your friends and your family feel when you cook for them? And how does that food enable conversations and connection between people? And that really led me to working in these healing retreats. I was brought into a group that was working with women who had experienced different versions of trauma, and they were doing, group therapy. They were doing ropes courses. They were doing body work. They were doing meditation. But one of the pieces that they found was that when women would come out of these sessions and go into, their breakfast or their lunch or their dinner, it sort of took them out of that space. And so they brought a friend of mine and me in to help hold that space for them within the experience of eating. And one of the things that we really prioritized in that experience was pulling from our community. So we worked with our local farmers. We shared with the women the stories of the food, of like, these apples come from this farm, and this is a 3rd generation apple farmer, and they're right down the street, and they also have goats. And it's like, it helps in the most basic way create presence, right? Presence in this moment, presence in what are we putting into our body and how we're connected to more than just this piece of food in front of us. We're connected to all the people that went into getting this plate of food in front of us, and then the people that are around us. So I find that's the journey that I'm on right now, is creating that deeper connection in how we interact with our food.
It's so inspiring, Kari. It sounds sacred, this thing that we do 3 times a day. It's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Kari, what motivated you, or what motivates you to go in this other direction?
I really appreciate you using the word sacred, because I think if you think about where food really comes from, it comes from Mother Earth, right? It comes from the magic of nature. There is a sacred wisdom in that. And our modern world has created such a disconnection between us and our food. And so when I moved to California, almost 18 years ago, I discovered the farmers markets here. And, there's such a different vibe that you get in a farmers market. People have just come to that space in a different way. And for me, I just felt like, oh my gosh, these are people who grow food. And, think of all the possibility that exists there, and all this bounty and all this health and all this magic. And so, what happened actually over the pandemic was my family and I decided that we would rip out our front yard and build a garden. And what I have experienced in that, and what really does motivate me every day, is the power of the soil, and the power of the soil to, yes, produce the cucumbers that are coming out of my garden, and the watermelons that we grew a watermelon that we harvested last week that's the size of our dog. Like, it's like, 15 pounds, which is so funny. But what's more beautiful, even in the food that we're eating out of our garden, is how our neighbors are just so drawn to it. And it's created so many of these conversations about, well, what are you doing? And how are you growing that? And, well, my mom grew tomatoes and my grandma grew eggplants, and, just all these stories that are connecting. People are so connected to that. And they're craving it. We're all craving that connection. And so I think that's what's motivating me right now. I don't know that I can put my finger on what it is, but I know it has to do with healing the soil and healing ourselves. There's such a value to truly nourishing ourselves beyond what we just put into our mouths, but in how that creates change on a cellular level, how that connects us to our spirit, the spirit of the people around us, the spirit of Mother Earth. I think there's such power in that.
Incredible. It's an incredible power, and it can literally reset your DNA. So
yes,
it's incredibly deep.
Yes, yes.
Kari,
Deep in the ground.
yeah, it's amazing. Kari, what would you say is your superpower? I mean, I think your superpower is this deep spirituality with which you, you know, build everything around what you do. What would you say makes you so good at what you do?
You know, that's such a great question. And I think I appreciate you asking. I've been thinking about it, but I think I think the ways to think about your superpower is that it's constantly evolving. You know, I think in some ways, my passion about food really boils down to like a very basic thing, which is like, I really like to eat and I want my food to taste good. And that led me to cook, which I found to be creatively satisfying. It led me to be more connected to the people around me, which felt, you know, I felt less alone. I think it led me to farmers markets where I made so many friends. It led me to growing my own food, which, you know, has connected me to this beautiful network of farmers and gardeners. You know, I have a neighbor who drops seedlings off at my front door. She has her own garden, and we started this conversation. She just drops off seedlings at my front door, and then, you know, though that squash plant has yielded all these squash that I've like cooked for my friends and my family. And so, you know, I don't know that that's a superpower. I think there's something that's just so elemental about following what feels right in your body. And that has just kind of what's led me on this path, is like, you know, always going back to like, does this feel right to me? And does this make me feel excited? And that's kind of where I'm at right now, is like, I don't really chef anymore for clients the way that I used to, but I found this deeper conversation in food, which I think really is something a lot of people need to hear. I think there's a lot of, you know, the truth is we've all been eating for a long time. We have positive stories about food and we have challenging stories about food. Every one of us does. And there's a lot of messages that we're receiving from our families, our friends, our culture, the media. And I think what I found is a piece in tuning a lot of that out. And I think there's a real value in empowering women to tune out a lot of voices and tune into their own voice. I really believe that.
It's very inspiring, Kari. It really, it's about being in your truth and speaking
Yes.
your truth at all times, and every now moment saying this, you know, is this my truth or not? It's very inspiring. I mean, we were talking about food, but this is real, you know, universal wisdom.
Yeah,
Kari,
it is.
what would your top tips be for other women?
You know, I really appreciate what you just said about like, you know, speaking your truth and standing in your truth, but I'll just also acknowledge that like everyone, I also have those moments of uncertainty and, you know, when I feel like, you know, knocked off of my path. And this morning I was listening to this podcast that I really love. It's called On Being. And it's this woman, Krista Tippett, and she's been doing this for years, and she interviews all these, I don't even want to call them thought leaders, but it's a really wonderful array of people who are into consciousness. And that can mean someone who is like a Buddhist monk, and that can also mean a scientist who studies UFOs. And that's a place where I go to feed myself. And I think these conversations, you know, can shift ideas in our mind about what's possible, about resources that we can access, about stories that we can access. And so for me, I think the tip is find that place for you, whether that's your, you know, whatever your spiritual practice is, if that's a church, if that's a meditation, if that's a group of friends who come together to support one another. I think having that community is so crucial. I think it's one of the most crucial parts of we are meant to live in community. We're not meant to live in solitude. And the solitude within ourselves is shored up by our ability to feel connected to other people. And so that's one of my favorite sources of spiritual depth, I think. And also the circles, which is where you and I met, is in circles of women where we can sit down with one another and speak our truth and hear other women speak their truth. I don't know that there's anything more powerful than that in the world, you know, women speaking their truth.
I agree. And we are all interconnected. And this is what we need to celebrate more, live more in our daily lives. Kari, my last question would be, where do you dream of being in, let's say, 5 years' time? What is your big dream still? You know, something you'd like to achieve, a place you'd like to go? What are your dreams?
I think, you know, you're asking for the 5 year. I would say in the 15 to 20 year, I see myself on a farm. I see a space where people can come and learn about the soil, the earth, the connection, where I can just feed people when they come to visit me. But I think before that, you know, I really do love Los Angeles, but I do love my little garden, and I'm not ready to give up the city yet. I think I visualize a book or two. I've always wanted to write a cookbook that, again, really goes beyond what is a recipe. You know, there's really no new things happening in recipes. You know, the recipes have kind of all been written. And I think what is promising and inspiring about that are the stories that come out of the recipes. And so, you know, what are the recipes that a mother made for her child? What are the recipes that a child remembers that their grandmother or their grandfather made, or that they, you know, that connects us to our ancestors, that connects us to our families, that connects us to our community, that connects us to a moment in time, you know, that elemental connection. I think that's what I am manifesting for myself, is sharing that truth with others and helping them to see the value in that. And we all have that experience. And so how do we tap into that? And how do we remind ourselves of, you know, really how truly magical we are, right? How magical we are and how magical the people around us are.
Kari, I'm bowled away. I can see the title of this book, Feeding Your Soul.
Feeding Your Soul.
It's a real hit. I cannot wait to read it. And I can't.
I'm going to have to give you credit. If I name the book Feeding Your Soul, you'll be in the dedication for sure. Thank you for holding that space for me.
No, thank you for talking to me, Kari. This was just amazing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. What a beautiful thing that you're creating here. And I can't wait to see where it goes. I'm so delighted.
Thank you.